So we really appreciate the attendance today, and when we were putting together the regional meeting agenda, this summer at the convention in Salt Lake City, we had a town hall meeting talking about homelessness. And it was one of the better town hall meetings that we've had, but it was kind of light on what are best practices and what are people actually doing in their communities. So I visited with our local board. We talked about what to do. We talked about the questions people have. And there are some things that we are doing in this community that I think are pretty spectacular. We can be an example to others. So when the Pacific Northwest Conference was here, we had talked about homelessness 2 years ago in Spokane and decided that rather than just talk about it, we would actually talk about solutions. And solutions really focus on kind of three areas. They focus on employment, they focus on housing, they focus on connecting people with the correct services. People have asked me, why are you so interested, engaged, involved? And I probably am not as interested, engaged, and involved as I should be. But many of you know my parents, who longtime Boise residents and have just spent an inordinate amount of time in the last 10 to 12 years working with difficult populations. They spent 6.5 years running a prison ministry for the women's prison out at Pleasant Valley. And they are now working with many of the social services organizations here in town on how do you reintegrate people when they come out of prison. Because that was my mom's biggest concern. She's like, we work, we teach, we engage, we encourage, we do all of that, and when people get out, we just give them, $5 and a bus pass and go get it. And so they have spent a significant amount of time working with Interfaith Sanctuary, working with St. Vincent de Paul, working with Chrysalis House, with a variety of these, and have engaged my siblings and our children in that effort. And through other responsibilities that I've had, I've gotten to work with a lot of these populations as well, and recognize that the historic approach that we take to managing commercial real estate will not solve this problem. So we have to be creative, we have to look at other things. So we're going to start by talking about employment. And Bret, if you'd come up, we've invited Bret Vaterlaus, who is a longtime BOMA member, and we've invited Jennifer Tomlinson from the city of Boise, and we're going to talk about employment. So thank you. So Jennifer, why don't you do a quick introduction of yourself and what you do?
Hi everybody, my name is Jennifer Tomlinson. I'm the Superintendent of Parks for Parks and Recreation. I oversee a team of about 85 people. We're responsible for all maintenance, custodial, development, design, basically any green park that you see in the city comes as part of our team, and I'll be talking a little bit today about our partnership with Interfaith Sanctuary.
Bret, you're not on.
Testing. All right. Bret Vaterlaus. I've been involved with Western Building Maintenance since I was 14 here in the Valley, and bought it when I was 25 from the original owners, and I've expanded into Washington and Oregon and all of Idaho. Currently have about 350 employees, and more recently also purchased Alloway Electric, an electrical contracting company with some other partners, and so we're pretty highly integrated within the community.
So janitorial services and landscaping are not exactly areas that people are typically beating down your door to come to work for you. So you both have a unique perspective on employing some difficult to employ people. Jennifer, you want to share with us what the city of Boise's experience has been with, due to the fact that you have a seasonal population and you're competing with non-seasonal work?
So we are acutely aware of labor shortages in the Treasure Valley as a result of our construction economy right now. We have every year for the last 5 years have never been able to completely fill out our seasonal workforce. We are a highly dependent on this workforce in the summer because everybody likes to go outside in the summer. we're fine in the winter because nobody really goes outside. But we have just been experiencing some real severe labor shortages, and that's creating a gap in our ability to actually deliver services to the public. So because of that, because of some of the other issues, we only pay $11 to $13 an hour for our seasonal staff, so we can't compete with most construction companies. We only let people work 40 hours a week, so there's no opportunity for massive amounts of overtime. So we have a couple of things working against us when we're trying to compete with the private labor market, I guess. And so we have been working with Jody and with the Interfaith Sanctuary since 2017 on a program to employ some of the residents that are the guests over at Sanctuary in some of these areas where we're really experiencing the labor shortage. So with landscape maintenance, custodial work, janitorial, and our parks keep getting busier and busier as we're getting more and more people in the Treasure Valley. So we keep having more and more work, and there's never going to be a shortage on our side of things for them to do. So we've really tried to address that shortage as much as we can through the Sanctuary program and employing this population.
And Bret, how is it for you as you staff and meet the needs of your clients?
It's become quite difficult for us because as we've become more affluent in our area, less and less of our children work. College students very rarely work. So what we end up with is we end up working with people that are very difficult to employ. And so you have to be pretty innovative in how you help them, work with them. A lot of our people, we have to help them get from paycheck to paycheck because they don't know how to manage their money. They don't know how to keep in their homes wherever they're living. We've just had to do a lot to actually help them in their personal lives so that they can work.
Now, one of the topics that we have talked about, and one of the questions that I know that our members have, is how do you employ people who have criminal records? Because that, for the longest time, has been, the number one disqualifying factor for employment. Yet there's a direct correlation between the ability of people to find and keep employment and to stay out of trouble. So Jennifer, what has the city done in that regard?
So this was probably our biggest hurdle to get over with our human resources department. They were not super interested in having this conversation, but after just kind of a very long process of getting to this point where they would be comfortable, we immediately said anybody who has a felony conviction for crimes against children or I think it was sex crimes, were immediately disqualified. But pretty much everything else was on the table. I think Jody mentioned yesterday that we actually hired somebody who committed a murder like 36 years ago, but has been incredibly rehabilitated and is an incredible worker. So it was a real cultural shift in the city for us, because that is a severely disqualifying question for most people who come to work for us. We do relax it a little bit even with our seasonals where, we're a little bit more lenient with like DUIs and things like that. But for a lot of these people, just the repeat offenses and they just have a really long criminal record, and it's usually just crimes, for being homeless. And so our human resource director had to say, okay, we are willing to do this. We will kind of change the way that we process these people. And so that's what we do. We set up a separate intake and qualification process for all of them. So they go through a different kind of background check than a regular full-time employee goes through. And it's actually been really successful for us. We've only had maybe 1 or 2 instances where things came up that were issues, but it was never in either a violent or any kind of interaction with the public. It was always just behaviors that needed to be addressed kind of in the workforce. So it's a cultural shift.
And how about with you? Because I would anticipate, Bret, that many of your clients that you serve have pretty high security expectations.
In general, in our industry, the contracts will specify that you really can't hire anybody that have records. A lot of companies that we've worked with, we can approach them and ask them, hey, we've got a person that's been doing some jobs that we don't expose them to your buildings in. We might have them doing snow removal or some other things that are outside. After they've worked for us for a while, we might approach one of our clients and say, hey, would you like to help somebody out, and work it that way. But in general, the way our environment is right now, we don't use people that have any kind of serious crime in any of the cleaning.
And, I mean, is that a reasonable expectation of property owners, realistically?
It would be dependent upon which side of the line you're on. For me, I'd love them to open up the doors and let us use some of these folks, because actually a lot of them have been rehabilitated and they're pretty good. But currently, what you look at is if, for example, in this building here, you know, the tenants of the building, you get multi-tenants, multi-use. The owners of the building are going to look at that and say, well, I don't want to take any risk on that because my tenants, if something came up missing, or if someone was approached incorrectly or something like that, then there's a feeling of we're not really taking care of our tenant. My thought on that personally is, having been in the industry for a long time, is that you know, it all depends on what as a community we want to accomplish. If we want to make a difference, then maybe what we have to do is look at just making sure that we take care of our facility in a way that we can bring people in that are in after hours, that can do that kind of work and do those kinds of things, and not be exposed to the temptations of things that they might be susceptible to if it's been a theft or something. But you know, it's a community project, and it's a community problem, so it can only be fixed as everybody works together on it. And I think it's interesting. I mean, one of the things that we become quite aware of, a lot of the facilities that we work in are videotaped 24 hours a day. And so the bottom line is really the exposure for a problem in the building becomes quite minimal, because in our training we can go through and explain, you know, you're being watched on everything you do. So just know that. And for most people, that's enough to have them understand that they probably will just stick to their job.
Well, and, you know, we find that, you know, we have a lot of discussions at BOMA International about, you know, yes, we need to be more proactive in engaging these populations for a variety of reasons. One, it's socially beneficial, but two, it goes to the bottom line. But what you're describing here, Bret, it seems like it takes a lot of time, effort, and energy on your part to do the right thing.
Well, one of the things I've learned that may help you with this is as we sit in this room and we think about what our goals are, we vary somewhat amongst our group, but we live in a band of similarity. And when you start working with people that are homeless or trying to get back into something, I met a guy one day. I was coming out of a Rotary meeting over on 6th Street, and a guy approached me and asked me for 20 bucks. And I said, well, I'll give you 20 bucks, but I need a half an hour. And so we sat down, we talked, and I got to know the guy, and pretty soon he had been a CEO of a company, and his wife and daughter had been killed in a drunk driving accident, and through that he just went into a no responsibility world and became homeless. And you know, we talked, and you know, in the conversation you're thinking, well, this guy probably wants to get out of that. So we talked for a little while. A couple weeks later I saw him, he came and approached me again, and then he looked up at me and he saw it was me, and he says, I don't have time for a half an hour. But the point is, he has a different idea about things. And so sometimes when we're looking at these folks that are challenged in for whatever reason, there's a lot of mental illness, there's a lot of addiction, there's a lot of just challenges of just maybe family problems, like that particular thing, and they have to have time to get out of it. But their expectation, their view of life is so different than what we perceive in our lives, that if we're ever really going to help them, we have to jump in and see the world through their eyes, and then see what the next step is. We think that they might want a car, when in reality that may not even be an issue. We think they want a house. That you got to find out what they want, and then start to move them piece by piece towards that.
So, Jennifer, I think a lot of people think that, the city of Boise, when you started this a couple of years ago, that you just went out, found people with signs, gave them a shovel, and put them to work. But there was a lot more involved in that, wasn't there? So will you kind of describe the genesis of your program and what the city of Boise has learned in this process?
Sure. So when we originally started looking at kind of what other cities across the country were doing, I believe it was Albuquerque in New Mexico, their public works department had kind of like a jumping off point for us, where they would go to people who are flying signs and say, basically, I have a day's worth of work for you to do, pay them cash out at the end of the day, pick them up, take them back, and then it was just sort of this kind of day labor type model. When in working with Jody and working through Interfaith, we realized that our model definitely needed to do something a little bit more than that. Our goal when we started this program was to get one person into housing, and to employ as many people as we could in this kind of program. We had no expectations at all. We had no concepts of what it was going to be. We wanted to be able to meet people where they are and be able to use them, to the best of their ability, and hopefully we would see some benefit out of that. So through that process, we, like I mentioned, the incredible shift in cultural norms in our human resources department, and getting through them. Our mayor and council were a large part of buying off on the program, and internally, especially for my team, working with these folks in the field, working with them side by side, was something that nobody on my team had ever thought of before. It never really entered anybody's mind. So we were super grateful to have the additional help. We had to kind of consider what our expectations were, and it really did come back to meeting these folks where they are and being able to work with them. We didn't have any expectation that we would be able to throw them on our forestry crew and they could go out and prune trees in the right of way. They're not going to be up in 100-year-old silver maples or in the North End or anything like that. But we started small, and we started with kind of the low-hanging fruit that we thought that would be able to be addressed. And we worked extensively on the scheduling, getting them to and from. The sanctuary provides transportation to them. They provide lunch for them. And I think the most important part of our program that makes it work so well is there's a case manager who's assigned to each of the teams that works for us. So they have that support built in for them every day when they come to work. If they have any issues, if they're starting to, if things are starting to go sideways, then there's always somebody who's there who's able to step in and help them. And we really wanted to be that kind of first step to get people back on the path to being able to be gainfully employed. So at our last check, we've had 53 people go through the program. We have 21 who are in housing now, I believe. So we think it's been really successful. We use them in all different kinds of ways. We have so many different kinds of facilities and things that they're able to participate in. In the dead of summer, they really enjoy going out to Idaho Ice World and cleaning the glass around each of the rinks, or doing janitorial work out there because it's inside and it's really cold. In the dead of winter, they it's nice to be outside because it's sunny and they get to go outside. But we put them at some of our highest used parks. We have them fairly regularly at Esther Simplot Park. We are also responsible for downtown maintenance. So we have a crew that comes down 2 days a week, and they do trash removal on the street. They clean out tree grates because most people use those as ashtrays, which is super gross. But they're down there, and they get into it and they pick it out. So I think probably the biggest takeaway from us is to set realistic expectations and really try to understand where they're coming from and get to that point.
So, you mentioned, Jennifer, transportation scheduling. Bret, you've talked about, helping people understand paychecks and things like that. As employers, what return do you get on that degree of personal assistance? Because that's an awful lot of time that's not related to cleaning buildings or mowing lawns.
Well, for me, there's a personal satisfaction. I'll give you just a little quick story of a couple that I'm working with right now. they were homeless, living and had some temporary housing with a friend. But they have a boy with autism and another boy that's got one of the other initial acronyms. I don't know them all, but they're basically homeless. They can't get anywhere. So we worked with them and worked out an arrangement. They're living in a hotel, motel in Garden City. It's about well, everybody stayed in a hotel room. There's 4 of them living in it. And we've had them there for about 6 months trying to get them some housing. We can't get them past a background check or anything for housing, so they're blocked from that. We worked with the gentleman and we got him a CDL license, and so he's actually driving for the sweet potato truck hauling company that hauls all those. And so he works nights. We got his wife working for us at Western Building Maintenance. We have their 2 children back in school, and they're starting to do okay. We've had to work through Social Security to get the money for the boys to come to them so that they've got some stability that way. What I want to show you is it takes, this has been a 6-month progress with these guys. And they move ahead a little bit, fall behind a little bit, can't make their rent, you gotta help them a little bit, kind of just keep doing all these kinds of things until you can finally get them more stable. Well, to me it's not much different than what we heard about the Boys and Girls Club. We just forget that there are boys and girls that turn into adults that really still are boys and girls, and they really don't know how to negotiate life where we live. And so they need somebody to do that and help them with it. And so my wife and I, we enjoy doing that. And we enjoy helping them. I have a career that allows me to help with that. And so there's a personal satisfaction of feeling like, I can give back some ways for the things that have been given to me. So that's part of what I look at. And that's both personal, but also for our community.
Jennifer, what have been your success stories?
Well, to get back to your previous question, it's a lot easier for us to do this because we have the built-in partnership with Sanctuary. That's probably the most critical piece of this program for us. We couldn't do it without them. And the support that they provide to our program is just, it's off the charts amazing. When we can call and say we need more workers, we don't have enough people showing up, and 2 weeks later we will have a force of 8 additional people show up. So it's a much different perspective from the public sector because we don't, we're not trying to make money or do anything like that. We're just trying to take care of the public's resources and assets in the best way that we can. And this is just such a multifaceted approach that it helps everybody involved. I mean, we need the labor, people need jobs, but they're not able to, get back into the workforce and the point where they're working 40 hours a week or they're working 5 days a week. A lot of these people aren't there yet. We have a crew that does nothing but work 19 hours a week because that's all they can do. So some of our success stories, though, we've had a few. We have one of our most recent ones. He started with the Sanctuary program maybe 2 years ago. I think it was 2 years ago. We hired him on as a full-time seasonal for this last season for our 8-month season over the summer, and he's just an incredible worker, and he works so hard. And him and I one day spent an afternoon unloading like post and rail fence over at the new dog park that we were building at Military Reserve, and I mean, he just was carrying fence posts for like 7 hours, and I was trying to keep up with him, and I'm a desk jockey, so I felt great the next day. But it was just it was a great time for me. I really enjoyed it. He had some issues working with some of our other crews, though. He never stopped talking, and he was always distracted by stuff. And so one of my crew chiefs was like, well, why don't we give him chewing gum so he stops talking to everybody? Worked. Like, super great worker. Or, he's so distracted by everything, so let's get him some noise canceling headphones. Also worked fantastic, because we had him out in our right-of-way unit, so, the cars passing by all the time was really intense for him. So I'm pretty excited, because we were able to actually hire him through the winter over at Idaho Ice World as one of our full-time staff out there doing a lot of the custodial work. And, he set goals for himself, small goals. He wants to be able to have his own transportation. He's still staying at the shelter, but he's working towards those goals, and we're an active partner with him. We give him an alternate place to show up every day so that he can drive out to the ice world with everybody, since there's no real transportation out there. And we have a few different stories like that. But I think the experience, both for my team and for the participants, it's been such an it's just a wonderful experience. And to be a part of it is just something that I think that we're really proud of. So.
Well, we really appreciate the efforts that you both are making in your sectors in this community, because it does provide an example and a template for how to do this and how to truly make a meaningful difference. And any final comments that you'd like to make about your experiences or programs as a takeaway for our members? Bret?
For those interested in trying to help, I know there's multiple service groups here like mine that provide services. I just tell you, there's a lot of reward in helping people as you bring them in and kind of work with them. If you've got the positions and the opportunities, it's a great opportunity to see them grow. For those of you that are hiring companies like ours to do the work, we may be at a point in time where you can look at that differently. Maybe instead of 18-year-olds, a 16-year-old can work in your building or on your landscaping or something like that. The contracts and everything kind of end up at these points of ideal, and it eliminates a lot of opportunities. So if you want to make a difference or look at it, review your contracts, see what you're willing to take a little bit of risk on, or talk to your tenants and say, what do you want to do? Would you like to be a community-minded tenant, and see if we can work with maybe this sector of people and take a little bit of risk and help them improve. It all has to start with all of us working together to do that, but currently contracts usually have blocked all of that. So that's kind of where we stand. So I just tell you, good thing to review, see if it's where you want to be.
Jennifer?
So I had an experience, as I'm sure all of you have been down around Rhodes Skate Park, right? Does everybody know where it is? Okay, most of us are local. So we have an issue managing that area. It's very close to all the services. It's very convenient for folks to just hang out in all day. And we tried a lot of different things in order to, we tried to kind of design the problem out of it. We put lava rock down there that is incredibly inhospitable. Nobody would ever want to sit on it. We tried to address the issue through a bunch of different ways. Increased security, anything you can think of, we tried. One day I was down there on the 15th Street side, which is where we built a parkour course, so that people can run and jump and break body parts and all that kind of stuff. And we had been having some issues with folks who were hanging out in the parkour course area. And one of the guys who had been down there pretty frequently, I started talking to him and just like, what's going on in the area, what are you doing? He's like, you know what, I've been thinking about this a lot and I have a really good idea for you. And I was like, okay, what is it? Like, I'm open. He goes, you need to epoxy this entire sidewalk so that you can stop sending people down here to power wash it like every 3 days, because I was sending somebody down there to power wash it every 3 days. And I just looked at him like, epoxy's really expensive. Like, I've never epoxied an entire sidewalk before. Like, that's just really strange. But I was like, all right, I'll give it a shot, right? Like, we'll try anything to keep this area clean. And we did, and it worked. And so now we only have to really like power wash it like once a month, which is fantastic for us. But we had so many surprises along the way, and we've learned so many lessons, and they've been such active participants in our business and what we do. And they have opinions, and they have great ideas for the ways to make things better. They see things totally differently than we do, because we're just looking at it from, you gotta mow it every 7 days, it's gotta be 2.5 inches high, we can't have weeds, people will complain, those kinds of things. But as they start to kind of become part of your team and they feel ingrained and invested, they really do have some really fantastic kind of points of view, and they're really able to help us design better areas for people that are more welcoming for everybody. And I think that's probably been the best part of the whole program for us, is really just what we've been able to learn and how we've been able to partner. And it's really opened our eyes to how we can address public spaces that can really, be an asset to everybody instead of like, oh, that's where all the homeless people go to hang out, so don't go down there. So anyways, epoxy everything, and then you don't have to power wash it all the time.
Well, thank you both very much. We appreciate your insight